Howdy, folks. I'm Charles Ham, author of Ponder on It, Pilgrims, a three-time #1 international bestseller that is now sold in 13 different countries. If you'd like to know more about it, you can visit my website, or you can go on Amazon and find it there and read reviews if you'd like. Today I want to talk about history. And to begin the conversation, I want you to do a little exercise with me or follow along. And imagine that you woke up this morning and you had total and complete amnesia. You couldn't remember anything that had happened in your past from that very moment. Nothing. This would be an interesting situation and a very horrible situation. You would still be able to speak English or your native language, but you wouldn't even know who you are. You would have no idea who you are. You wouldn't know your name. You wouldn't know anything whatsoever about yourself. You wouldn't remember anything about people that you knew, people that might come into your life that day. They could be your kinfolks, your mom, dad, your brothers, sisters, your wife, your husband, and you wouldn't know anybody. Imagine how horrible it would be to have something like that happen to you. Well, here's my point. I think that to a certain degree, collectively as a people, there is a certain amnesia that goes along with not understanding or having a basic knowledge of history. Now, as a person with amnesia, you would remember nothing about your past life. And so everything would be totally confusing, and you could see how much better things would be as your psychological state of mind if you have the point of reference of years of knowledge and experience that came with living those years, but you'd lost it all. I always had a real interest in history, and I always considered it, and it sounds cliched and I've heard it, but a knowledge of history is a way of understanding the present. A knowledge of the past gives you a point of reference to understanding what's going on today, not just in your own personal life, but in the bigger picture of what's going on, for instance, in our country, or what's going on in the world. When I was just a young man, I had just unexplainable interest in knowing about the past. And I developed a keen interest in what is called prehistory, which I find an interesting term because it's the point where we go from written, known history into a time when we have amnesia and we really don't know very much about what's going on. And I was always interested in what was going on back in that time, much like someone might be finding out about their own past personal life if they had amnesia. But I have found it to be a very key part of what I consider to be our own development as human beings and the perspective that we have on ourselves and that we have on life in general. And to understand the flow of history through the ages sort of makes sense out of things and gives us a perspective that we wouldn't have if we didn't have that knowledge. Now, one of the things that I have recently taken up is the study of my own ancestry. My son and I have gotten involved in this, and I found it to be sad, and when I talk to other people as well, that some of them cannot remember the name of their great-grandparents on maybe either side of their families. And it's kind of sad to think about how quickly we're forgotten. But in the generations that come after you, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, what is the likelihood that they'll not only not have never met you or know anything about you, but won't even know your name? All of this has an effect on how we view who we are. My family roots, I'm a Texan, but my family roots go back to Kentucky. And I'm very proud of having that association with that beautiful state. And my son and I started running our ancestry back, and we realized how quickly we were in the dark about some things that enriched our lives when we found out to be true. For instance, my great-grandfather on my dad's side and my great-great-grandfather on my mother's side, both were Civil War veterans, and I didn't know that. I learned their names and actually found out that they had both fought in the Civil War. Interestingly enough, they only lived about 10 miles from each other in Kentucky, but one fought for the Union and the other one fought for the Confederacy. And my great-grandfather Ham, who had fought for the Confederacy, had been a cavalryman and was captured by Union soldiers at the Battle of Cynthiana in Cynthiana, Kentucky, and spent quite a bit of time in a prisoner of war camp in Rock Island, Illinois, where he became gravely ill, and when he came back home, he lived his entire life in poor health. My grandpa Dayton, the man that fought for the Union, was actually murdered when he was 41 years old by a band of regulators. And all of this interesting history started coming back to us, and we found it all fascinating. And I actually found out that my grandfathers on both sides of the family both fought in the American Revolutionary War. And what I kind of learned in the study of my ancestry is this sense of a deeper feeling of who I actually am. These were direct descendants of mine, people who I'm related to directly by blood. And though I never met them, to know more about them was just a wonderful thing that I think made me understand again, as I said, who I really am as a person and where I came from. And I think today one of the problems that we have is that we don't have a sense of a point of reference, and we don't understand things that are going on in our country and in the world today because we don't have an understanding and a knowledge of prior history. Much of what is going on in our own country, to really understand it, you have to understand what was going on beginning back about the turn of the 20th century in the early 1900s. To understand what is going on in the world today, you would need to understand about the world wars, for instance, World War I and World War II, and how the nations were affected by this and the impact that it had on the world. I've just always had a sense that to really understand things and to be wise, a person had to have a certain grasp of history, and it's not being taught as it used to be. in our schools, and people so often seem woefully ignorant of things just in recent past that I think that it's affected us adversely and made us less as a people. My Texas grit this time is going to be: wisdom is seldom found in one who has no knowledge of history. I think it is one of the key points in being able to make wise decisions from a larger perspective than our own personal experience. All right. I love y'all. Thank you and goodbye.